Okay, so oh, geez, I have too many tabs open today. There we go. All right, so we have Ness Perry here today from the Latino Economic Development Center. They are an advocacy specialist for the small business team, and they oversee the development of policy plans and goals that support business owners along the Purple Line corridor in Prince George's and Montgomery County, as well as the greater advocacy goals of the LEDC. Ness brings 6 years of experience working in the policy field, beginning in Orange County, California. At the age of 15, Ness wrote their first bill for the California State Legislature. This launched her interest in the world of politics. Most prevalent to the discovery was Ness's affinity for how politics and law shape everyday life. Ness moved to Washington, D.C. in 2017 with the goal of obtaining an undergraduate degree and working in the policy field. She spent her first summer in D.C. working for the Project on Government Oversight, where they contributed to research that exposed the Department of Homeland Security for its treatment of migrants in ICE detention facilities. This research contributed to the drafting and introduction of a bill by Senator Durbin from Illinois and Senator Cory Booker. Following this, Ness worked at Network for Catholic Social Justice as a communications associate, supporting their lobbyist and policy goals through social media. The press and grassroots organizing, social media, the press and grassroots organizing. Ness enjoyed creating policy strategies that supported access to food, tax breaks for families, and the common good. Ness has a bachelor's in history from Trinity Washington University and a master of legal studies from the Caruso School of Law at Pepperdine University.
Go Waves.
In their free time, Ness likes to attend concerts, try new vegan recipes, and hang out on the back deck with her roommates. So please join me in welcoming Ness Perry.
Yeah, you do. Thank you. That's such a fun bio. Like it's like all encompassing. All my fun. Oh, we're way at the end.
Oh.
Can you
I will.
start from the beginning?
All right, get a
Well, you get a preview. Okay, look away.
And
all right.
here we go.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ness Perry. Once again, thank you for the wonderful intro. That was really fun. I'm the Advocacy Specialist for the Latino Economic Development Center, based here in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and Puerto Rico. And we'll get a little bit more into who LEDC is after this. Here's my agenda for today. I'm going to fully immerse everyone in what the Purple Line is. Show of hands, I know you're eating, so I don't want to hear from you just yet, for those of you in the room. But show of hands, does everyone know, or does anyone know who the Purple Line, what the Purple Line is? I don't want to see your hand. All right, well, we're going to get more into a discussion as to, why it's important that we learn about this and why everyone in this area should care about it, especially for those here at College Park too. So general timeline, I'm going to give you, a breakdown of what technical assistance LEDC has offered to small businesses, construction mitigation efforts as well, and then also a reflection on kind of what those efforts have culminated into. Oh, there we go. This is me. Oh my gosh. Not the. Oh, there it is. Hopefully it doesn't skip yet. Okay. Well, anyway, this is me. You already learned about me. I'm originally from Orange County, California. You're probably wondering, what are you doing in College Park? What are you doing in the Purple Line? I fell in love with Washington, D.C. for its essence and for the people that made it what it is. And in saying that, I fell in love also with the greater, metro region. I also am half Mexican, so I'm Mexican American. I identify as a Chicana. So I do also care always about supporting my own community in everywhere that I can, which is why I've been aware of LEDC, and I became aware of LEDC. I love questioning power structures, as you might have heard in my a little bit in my bio. I love figuring out, what it is that is causing an issue and going directly to the source if possible. And obsessed with systems change, obviously the law, because we know that a lot of our problems come from, whether that be law, whether that be policy, it's usually something in between or a cross area of those two things. All right. I might have you be, yeah. Thank you. All right, so here we are. So I have a little bit of background about LEDC today. So on July 3rd, 1991, LEDC was incorporated as a community-based nonprofit first. A group of bankers, business people, and civil rights activists united to launch the LEDC that we know today. And for 32 years, our mission is to drive the economic and social advancement of low to moderate income Latinos in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, as well as Puerto Rico, by equipping them with skills and tools to achieve financial independence and become leaders in their community specifically. And next slide, that's a beautiful photo of us. So this is kind of a little bit about our legacy, which a lot of folks often don't know about. But in May of 1991, prior to its inception, there were uprisings in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood in Washington, D.C. If any of you are aware of the Mount Pleasant neighborhood, it is a high density Latino population there, and is basically after a clash between a Salvadoran immigrant and the Metropolitan Police there. So local government established as a response, established essentially what is a Latino working group, and LEDC was born out of that because there was a clear need for financial, economic, and then also housing support for those recently arrived immigrants in that area, as well as the greater Washington, D.C. area. So looking at larger access and larger, access to wealth and key wealth building tools is definitely one of our motivators. So that's something that we'll talk a little bit more about later down the line as well. There we go. All right, so LEDC today has 5 offices, all across the DMV, of course. And then we do have one in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, with 100+ employees. Our organization is structured into 3 primary areas of focus. That is small business, housing, and direct community investments. And I'm going to get into what each of those areas does in just a second here. Let's first housing. So our affordable housing programs, they do range from comprehensive housing counseling. We are HUD certified. We do have HUD certified housing counselors, and we do also do, so that's to promote homeownership, right? But we do also do the other side of things, which is eviction prevention and tenant services, which is equally as important. We have to identify those key, once again, tools to access to wealth building, but we also need to worry about what's actively happening in our community. So pre-purchase housing counseling to rental counseling, post-purchase, in terms of access to programming as well and government funding, we do provide access to those type of grant opportunities as well for folks that qualify. This is our small business slide. I chose the photo on the left because it presents EWI, which is our first one side of our small business services. EWI is actually Empowered Women International, and what they do is they have a robust program for women focused on helping women entrepreneurs getting their programs off the ground, and then also making sure that they're able to flourish once their businesses are off the ground. This is actually a visibility event most recently at the University of Maryland. And then this left side is actually our Small Business Maryland, some of our Small Business Maryland team at Trippy Tacos, which is based in Wheaton, Maryland, which is on the Purple Line. And this is a business that we are able to support. What's Wheaton? Not direct Purple Line, but sorry, Montgomery County side. Thank you. Thank you. So for business and small business formation, we do support with registration, licensing, business planning, strategic marketing, legal consultation, and our lending products do provide include personal credit building specifically. So credit building loans and small business startup loans, because once again, that access to wealth needs to be and access to credit services before starting a business is super, super important, as well as to help businesses grow and scale. Here's our direct community investments slide. There's a photo of them. Recently, they did reach over 100 million in funding, dispersing over $100 million in funding. So what our DCI team does, and this is very complex, and I love the DCI team for this, they go in and they support local government with creating access to government forms, grants. They do grant management for local governments to make sure that money is reaching the folks that it is intended to reach. And it's really complicated once again, but what this team does is they go in, they say, hey, Fairfax, Virginia County, I see you have this grant to support folks with paying for, let's say, childcare, for example, that's one of them that we have with them. And they'll go in and they'll say, hey, we want to make sure that this is reaching our community and the communities that you want it to reach the most. So they'll go in and they'll make sure that that form, that government, really complex government form is broken down in a way that is accessible for all, including translation services alongside, breaking down from legal terms into more layman's, terminology. Now that I've gone through those three, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Purple Line and why we're here today. So the Purple Line is a $3.4 million project. It is a 16.2 mile light rail ranging from PG to Montgomery County. And it does, while it has the emphasis and the aspiration to provide access for a lot of folks that are in the suburbs to more metropolitan areas and connect greater Maryland and PG County and Montgomery counties to Washington, D.C. metro region, it also poses a threat. And this is something that I think is super, super important that we understand today. If you're not listening to anything, it has the opportunity to be a success, but at the same time, it does pose a threat to those marginalized communities that I was just talking about, and specifically the communities that LEDC serves. Now, this is the DC Metro map in its full entirety, everything including the new Silver Line. So this is most recently built out. And then over here, if you see, the Purple Line is actually built into there. So this shows all of the stops that the Purple Line will have, and as well as the connection that it has to the greater metro. As of right now, it connects at 4 spots, and you can see those 4 spots. I love that it connects to the red line twice because I live on the red line, so I can take a little shortcut. But essentially, just to give you an idea of what it'll look like integrated into the DC Metro. Now, let's zoom in a little bit. Thank you. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at, once again, those marginalized communities. So I love this map because it shows the median household income for those all the way in the back and for those online. It shows the median household income. You can kind of see it there. But if you look over here, so Riverdale, New Carrollton, which is an area that LEDC does serve with small business support. If you look at the income, it's $64,000 median annual income. Let's look over here at Bethesda and Chevy Chase. $138,000, almost $140,000 annual median income. So you're looking at not only cross county, but you're also looking at cross class background. And that's part of our services are focused on identifying these key areas and saying, hey, like what small businesses are there, who needs the most help, right? We want to make sure that everyone is included in that conversation. Obviously, when it comes to displacement, it comes to gentrification, we want to make sure that we're addressing those key areas. This is the third and last map. I promise you, you're probably all mapped out by now. Hang in there. This is the third and last map that I have to show today. But it does identify, once again, those 6 equity areas as identified by the Purple Line Corridor Coalition and the National Center for Smart Growth, specifically looking at where the Purple Line cuts through. And these areas were identified because of basically the risk that they have to displacement. There are 830 businesses estimated in these areas that we know of that are at risk of displacement that we have identified through research. But I will say that these are our areas that we, in LEDC especially, we focus on working with small businesses. All right. Now, I mentioned PLCC earlier. That's the Purple Line Corridor Coalition. Actually, we have someone in this bottom corner. We have a photo of a lot of great partners in that coalition. And then we also have one of the small businesses that LEDC has supported in that right corner called Stars Beauty with Maria Llanos. She's one of our small business coaches at LEDC who supports that small business. But I wanted to talk a little bit about PLCC and the Small Business Action Team today because it is integral to the work that we do. Working in coalition is something that has been wildly successful for us, and I'll get much more into depth of that a little bit later, and then ideally again in our post discussion as well. But essentially, it is a coordination of localized CBOs, so community-based organizations that are all focused on small business growth and success while the purple line is set to come on. Now, communication on the construction and schedule and impacts is something that we do actually right now monthly. We're always trying to advocate for small business and coordinate our efforts so that way they're targeted. That way we're not all doing work in separate areas. Instead, we're all working together as one in one specific area. Now, I will say that we focus on three main areas, which is joint marketing efforts, coordination by service providers, which is us, and advocacy on behalf of small businesses. As a place-based manager as well, we do also support with things like I said, marketing, when you're looking at when a small business is trying to scale and they're trying to grow, they're trying to get better at whatever their offering is. We have some folks like Bobby Boone who looks and says, hey, like, let's look at the interior of this small business. How can we make sure that, you know, folks are able to access services better, or that they're more appealing to the public and, you know, people want to go in there. Things like that. That's what PLCC is here for. That's what we do. All right. Thank you. All right, now I have a beautiful timeline of events here. This is just a snapshot. This is not an entire timeline. If I were to do an entire timeline, I would probably need a full hour. But LEDC actually developed a model with existing small businesses, specifically in those neighborhoods that are experiencing change. The rapid neighborhood changes like gentrification, large-scale construction projects, transit-oriented development. This happened in 2015. This was obviously not the onset of the purple line, but it was in the middle of when we decided to get involved in anti-displacement efforts. Implementing that model in Montgomery County specifically, providing disruption impact preservation services to micro businesses that were surrounding the Wheaton redevelopment project is what we did with that model. So implementing that in Wheaton was a huge project. It was 308 square feet, 14-story tall building that housed several Montgomery County offices, including the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Now, this construction project is 100% complete now, and we were able to support a lot of businesses in that area that were undergoing that redevelopment. We supported them with technical assistance and everything I said previously, those services, we were able to help them with marketing and just really just be there for them amid a rapid change that was coming to their area. Implementing that model in Montgomery County was something that we then took on, and then obviously in the Purple Line specifically. So that's kind of when we started getting involved with the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, and that's when we really started to implement that model in a larger scale. Oh, sorry. Before I get there, the larger name of that program is called the Resilient Trade Corridors, if anyone is curious, and applying that model once again, trying to break down those external forces and make sure that, you know, small businesses can stay where they are. Next slide. Thank you. All right, here's where we get into kind of the more policy focused side of things. So we had that goal to help organizations and companies survive that often chaotic transition period that we saw during the Wheaton redevelopment project, in order to benefit from the economic advantages that come along once those projects are complete. So in 2020, the Maryland General Assembly set aside $2 million in grants to help businesses impacted by the Purple Line project. That $2 million was not allocated. It wasn't. Put it simply, it just wasn't. And folks started to get really stressed out and really, it was a rough time because small businesses said, hey, like this money is there, we should be able to have access to it. And advocates really were starting to speak out. That's when we saw a lot of advocacy. Obviously, goes without saying, this is 2020. Realistically, COVID is happening. Small businesses are struggling as is. Alongside an ongoing construction project, obviously, it was not a good mix. So the governor did have discretion to allocate those funds, but they went unspent. That's when Delegate Wilkins spoke up and stepped in and created a charge. She created a charge. She said, hey, let's go to the Tacoma Lane Crossroads. Let's have a press conference. I need to call attention to this. This is unacceptable. She led a charge to release those funds. And like I said, a press event we're going to watch a little clip of that where you get to see some community partners as well speak up and advocates in that charge. But Delegate Wilkins was successful ultimately in securing 2.5 million through construction disruption grants. That is the golden child of this. That's what came of this. But in 2021, those businesses then became eligible to apply for grants of $5,000. As a business owner, $5,000 can barely cover rent. So while that is not enough, it was something. We were able to see a semblance of, hey, the state cares. The state wants to be involved in this. They're trying to help us in as many ways as we can right now, but we'll take what we can get. Of course, now in 2023, the remaining $2 million has been made available through county applications specifically, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But I think that something that LEDC and that all of the small business coaches I work with believe in is that current residents and business owners do have a right to the success that a redevelopment brings. They should not be excluded in that. And that's something that you'll hear a little bit from Delegate Wilkins as well. Yeah, next. Here we have. Should I try?
I think it's gonna need to load.
Okay, once it's loaded up.
At this time, there is no way you can be able to survive. So please, Governor Hogan, please do this as soon as possible.
This year, the Maryland General Assembly took the unprecedented action of setting aside $2 million in the budget for businesses impacted by the Purple Line construction. This is recognizing the specific impact that this construction has had on these businesses. It's very unfortunate the governor has been silent when these businesses are struggling.
It is the most interesting, diverse, immigrant, minority-owned businesses that are at most risk of not making it through, and they're the ones who make our economy what it is.
We've seen the roads closed. We've seen entrances blocked as a result of Purple Line construction. And yet these businesses still supported the premise of Purple Line and the benefits that it would bring in the future.
So Vita is where we're standing right now. It's a business that has unfortunately closed due to the compounding effect of the Purple Line and then COVID-19. And this is just a stark example of what is to come if these businesses don't get the financial support that they really deserve. We're not getting the support we need from the state. We've been asking for years for assistance for these businesses because of the Purple Line construction. And what we were told by the former Secretary of Transportation and FDOT is that they didn't want to set a precedent for construction projects and provide assistance, financial assistance to the businesses in this area. The city stepped in and provided a mini grant program to help hold people over. But we can provide in the city is only a small fraction of what these businesses need. And unfortunately today we're standing outside of one of them that did receive assistance from the city, but it wasn't enough.
All right, so next one, please. There we go. So while we have all of these issues, we're quickly identified a bunch of tools, specifically looking at 4 tools, but today I'm just going to talk about 2 of those tools once again because of time constraints, and I can get into a whole talking about all 4. But while the new transit system is set to provide increased mobility, once again, it does pose a threat. So we were able to build a toolkit of influence and resources and specifically ensure positive outcomes when looking at placemaking and technical assistance on the Purple Line specifically, including like what you just saw, collaboration with local and state stakeholders, as well as community members. Next, please. So one of those first things I wanted to identify was our technical assistance. So through the timeline, LEDC and the PLCC identified a bunch of tools. But when construction began, nonprofits and the public sector did quickly try to step in. As you heard, the city even stepped in at one point to try to say, hey, we're still open. Even though this is happening, businesses are still open. The bills don't stop. So of course, signage was important in that, but it wasn't the only thing. We were able to see that technical assistance, specifically LEDC, we were able to provide that. And we do have a select group of bilingual and culturally competent business advisors to provide services to support those existing businesses and to those who want to launch enterprises. You know, like I said, the bills don't stop, the dreams don't stop either. And specifically when looking at those business owners, you know, we don't have any costs associated. So we do provide all of these services, including legal services, that we connect them to at no cost to the business owner. So this is specifically, and you're probably wondering what this is, but this is essentially what the formula that Maria Llanos, our small business coach, came up with for building trust and providing those services in the most successful way. The first is to meet the client in person. You would think that would be what I don't like to use the word, but common sense. But it's not. You would be surprised in mid-2020, a lot of folks look to virtual tools. While virtual tools can be greatly effective, it's important to build trust by showing up in person and saying, hey, business owner A, I'm here for you. I'm here for you in person. I'm a member of your community. That immediately builds so much more trust than saying, here's an email, I keep calling your phone, even though, you know, everyone else is calling your phone, including customers, and you keep thinking I'm a customer and I'm not. You know, building that trust is so important to first do. The second thing is to apply an assessment, and that assessment of needs creates scalable solutions. And that way we apply that specific solution to the problem and the outcome is significantly more successful. Finally, that follow-up. So once again, that in-person follow-up that, hey, I connected, you know, so-and-so that works for the city. They're looking for, you know, if it's a food-oriented business, they're looking for a contract where you can provide sandwiches to their meetings monthly or whatever that might look like. But being able to show up for folks in person is something that is super important to us. And also moving right along to Purple Line specific issues, applying for grants. And once again, those grant monies did come available to those at the county levels specifically, and how to apply for those grants was something that we still do to this day, and consulting them throughout that the relationship and to continue the process as well. Thank you. Obviously technical assistance is an effective tool, but it also is resource intensive and challenging to scale due to, like I said, skilled staff specifically. We do have a small team, but orgs with strong reputations and relationships are well positioned to do things like that, including those that are in the Purple Line Corridor Coalition. Moving right along to state funding, as you heard from Delegate Wilkins, state funding is something that once again was really difficult to obtain, and we learned that. Now it was obviously a result of multiple years of reduced business. We kind of had to create the case, right? We had to show that, hey, there's reduced, not only is there reduced business, businesses are shutting down, they're being displaced actively. They're, you know, as you see Kempa Cafe, that was the speaker that you saw first speak. She's an active advocate in the downtown Silver Spring area. Specifically supporting her community on the street that she is located on. And she's really active and really outspoken in not only supporting small business owners, but advocating and building those advocacy circles and saying, hey, let's get coffee. Let's figure out what we can do as small business owners. Let's connect with LEDC to see what our options are. But those advocacy efforts in gaining that 2.5 million in business money and support money for businesses was definitely a really, really big step. Only 500,000 of that money was allocated in 2021. And a lot of folks asked, you know, like, why is that? You know, why did that happen? And we're going to get into that hopefully in our post discussion, but the distribution of those funds was more difficult than we originally thought. You know, you think that state funding, it comes by, hey, it's available, here it is, take it counties, and the counties are meant to disperse it, and you think it'd be that simple, but no, it requires, it literally takes a village. Partners like Benton Village, Discover Bonifant, LEDC, City of Tacoma Park obviously helped recruit business advocates to ensure visibility of the issue and of the grant money that became available. But in 2021, businesses did become eligible once again to receive those $5,000, but that remaining money just was never, it was very difficult to get out. And we're going to talk about solutions to that as well in future slides. So this is like a brief overview of what went well. I think there's a lot that went well, but there's also a lot to learn, right? So lots of build areas. The implementation of those grant funds helped cover those basic needs. They did. $5,000, all money is green. It is available. It was available. It was made available. That 2020 period of time, though, I think was incredibly important and integral to the period of change that the Purple Line was experiencing amid COVID as well. Delegate Wilkins actually did help lead local advocates in a campaign to demand funds from the governor, obviously, and that led to 2.5 million in grants. But she also just you claimed that small business owners were integral to that. She said, we couldn't have done this without them. This is something that is super important to not only to the state of Maryland, but to her constituency as well. And of course, like I said before, the COVID-19 pandemic obviously brought a lot of attention to the need to support small businesses. And while that can be seen as a win for a lot of folks, I see it as a challenge area. Like, we should have been paying attention to them before 2020. We should have, and we should have made sure that at the onsite of the Purple Line construction project in general, we should have held small businesses at the core and at the crux of the discussions in the first place. I wanted to talk a little bit about HB 978, which is a tax credit piece of legislation that was proposed, that Delegate Wilkins proposed, and that was proposed in 2018. So there was an initial effort to support small businesses that were affected specifically by construction. But while it didn't pass in 2018 and she tried to introduce it again in 2019, that could have been revived. You know, we definitely could have tried to revive that one. That's not to say that it can't happen in the future. I think that's something that I genuinely think could help support those small businesses. As we know, taxes are something that everyone has to pay. It's something that is always promised. So as we went along in this timeline as well, that distributions of funds, I wanted to bring that up again. It was burdensome, to say the least. It was definitely burdensome on those small businesses, and it kept falling on community-based organizations like LEDC and FSC First, to name a few, to specifically take care of managing the application process, to making sure that folks were able to receive the money, and making sure that tax paperwork was filed properly, so that way the state could see that there was a clear need. This obviously places more strain on us, unfortunately. That's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here to support, but that strain is unnecessary, because it should not fall on the responsibility of the small business owner in the first place. And that's all I have to talk about today. I think something that I wanted to kind of go back to, though, it works when it wants to. Something I wanted to go back to is go back one more. Specifically looking at the application process for each county. That's something that is not necessarily talked about too much in current conversations, I don't think, is how each county has their own separate application. And in that, they also have their own separate, requirements for application in the first place. And then finally, in Montgomery County, for example, I'll look at the Montgomery model just because I think it's a little different in the sense that while $5,000 was made available to every business, it was just a cut. Let's take that big amount, that big 500, and cut it across how many businesses are on that area. And as we know, I see a lot of head shaking. As we know, that's not equitable. Looking at money equitably is different than looking at it equally. And we know the difference between equity and equality. And that's not equitable. Looking at a business that is 2 feet from a Purple Line stop versus a mile down the road from a Purple Line stop is completely different. Those that are right there in front of it, unfortunately have seen, like you saw the cafe, where there's literally a tractor in front of her. A dump truck right in front of her entrance. And she has dust in her window every day that she has to wipe down. That's extra work, extra labor, extra time, extra cleaner. We can go down the list and break down the long-term effects of that. But you wouldn't think that $5,000 would immediately take care of that. It just wouldn't. It's not realistic to think that. So ideally, in the future, I think an equitable split on that amount per effectiveness and how affected the business are by the Purple Line construction is better for small business owners in general. That's my 2 cents, and I'll leave it off to John to take over, and I think we're gonna take a break and then we're gonna head into
Q&A.
Q&A.
Yeah, Q&A first.
Q&A first,
Before the
okay.
break.
There we go.
So first of all, we have a applause. Thank you so much for your amazing presentation. I guess now we're gonna open it up for the next about 10 to 12 minutes for Q&A, both for our virtual and in-person audience. So if you have a question virtually, just put in the chat, but
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Ness. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a lot to ask you, but so my background prior to the UAC was doing corridor work in Philadelphia, and was a corridor manager in 2021 during COVID. And we often found that there was this issue where like the businesses that needed the most assistance were the businesses who it took the most time to get them to cross the finish line, and it was really challenging where like the CDCs would kind of need to make the determination like, okay, like, do we take some of the low hanging fruit? Do we sit down and meet with this person and, you know, taking the time to work through like taxes in a shoebox and, you know, how do we get this person there? How do we not lose them? How do we build trust? And so like, I'm wondering any takeaways that you have for like navigating those barriers to access and also building trust along the way. And I'm just curious, like when you mentioned the need to show up, like how many times did folks need to show up and like what were the strategies to kind of get the foot in the door, especially when there were so many scams at that time and businesses were, you know, really fearful.
Yeah, from my understanding, and this is upon my review of those situations, multiple. It took not just one, it took, oh, not only are we going to come and introduce ourselves to the owner, but we're going to frequent this space. Yeah. We're going to make sure that it's known that we are in this community and we're not just here as a nonprofit, just like knocking on doors, trying to get people to sign up for grants. That wasn't our goal. Our goal was to build that trust. If the goal is initially to build that trust, I think that was definitely the way for them to open up to us and say, hey, like actually somebody reached out to me about this today, and come to find out that might have been a scam, you know, or, you know, we might be able to identify like, hey, like, oh, you got that email. What email? I never sent an email. And then it was also a scam, you know, whatever that is, getting folks to, obviously just meeting folks where they're at, whether that's, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to be your last customer for the day, or, you know, hey, let's grab coffee on the weekend when, you know, your business might not be open, or if it's an odd hour of the day, I can give you a call. A lot of our small business coaches work odd hours and they drive a lot. Yeah. I've learned that they work odd hours and they drive a lot because they need to show up for folks wherever they might be. Does that help answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. As like the access and overcoming like taxes. Do you have any
so for that specifically, I don't, that's not my expertise. However, I will say that I can connect you with one of our small business pitchers that do deal with that quite often. In my experience, they do deal with taxes in a shoebox or in a mattress, unfortunately, because a lot of our folks are either unbanked or underbanked long term.
Thank you.
We have a few questions online, so I'll start with one from Dr. Willow Lunga Mom. She asked, what are the prospects of maintaining the momentum for support for vulnerable small businesses beyond direct impacts associated with COVID and Purple Line construction? Is there a plan for longer term advocacy at the county and state level for funding and support for these businesses that will also be vulnerable to displacement as these neighborhoods continue to redevelop beyond construction?
Dr. Imam, yes. Dr. Willow, yes. There is. As of right now, we're in a place with the Purple Line Corridor Coalition where we're trying to map out what our biggest wins might be able to be. Whether that's connecting on a local level first which lately it has been. Connecting to our local council members in both the PG County and the Montgomery side is definitely someplace we are starting. Conversations around not just another grant, but another grant that is equitable are happening as well. Once again, that's like something I can definitely drive home, is that the grant can happen, the money can be there, we can get it, but if it doesn't go to the right people, it's not doing what it's set out to do. And it won't be successful. And then on top of that, I know that on the state level, we're trying to keep the momentum going. That's really what we're trying to do, especially amid upcoming budget season. It's super important that we not only keep that allotment, but also hopefully get more, so that way we're able to work on a local level to disperse it properly. That's all I know right now, and that's all I'm allowed to share as well. I know right now we're in the kitchen right now. We're cooking.
I have a related question. I'm Kate McFarland with the School of Public Health, Environmental Health. This is not necessarily my area, but I do work out in the community, and my area is around environmental health and occupational health. And so I've been struggling a little bit to really, because I can always find a health connection in anything, in the community. But I didn't want to go there first. First, what I wanted to do was to talk about that policy, that law in 18 and 19 that didn't pass, versus the designation of the funds, which was also a law and seemed like such an incredible win, and then got stalled.
Right.
Kind of related to the question of the person online. It's like, what is the state's overall policy around small business support? I mean, do we want it as a state? And if so, there must be some support. So I do more public health, and sometimes it's really confusing what our public health policy is too, but we can sort of generally see the contours of it. And I don't really know the small business policy world very much. I'm sorry.
That's interesting, because to go back to that, the HB 78, 879, there's always HBs going on in my head. To go back to that tax credit, it was a tax credit. It was a tax credit piece of legislation, which, depending on who you're speaking to, can be very, very controversial, especially for small businesses. A lot of folks don't think that, because of the fact that their existence is to survive and to be successful and make money. If that's the ultimate goal, a lot of folks, often the opposition is like, hey, they have money, we don't need to give them the tax break. Where, if you ask me personally, I think we should, especially for micro businesses that are affected by construction disruption. There's a lot that goes into that conversation. That's why we need advocacy at that level. At the state right now, our delegate Wilkins is our champion. She is ultimately our champion. We haven't heard too much from anyone else at the state level. To go back to Dr. Imam's question, we haven't heard too much from the state level as of recently, but that doesn't mean that it's completely off the table. I don't know if you've heard most recently, but in Maryland, the transportation budget just got a huge cut, $3 billion.
Yeah.
$3 billion. So ideally in the upcoming budget, they're keeping us in the front of mind, and ideally, moving forward, it's going to stay that way.
Yeah.
But I will say, at the state level, we have one voice right now, and it's difficult. That's definitely a challenge that we're facing. To try to get attention to the issue is one of the reasons why we try to get our voice out. We're trying to be active in our community, but at the local level, it only goes so far. We do have great champions at the local level as well. Evan Glass, we have Wanika Fisher as well on the PG County side. And then on the Montgomery County side, we do have a few other folks as well. So at the local level, it's hopefully staying in the front of mind, and we're definitely actively meeting with those folks too regularly to keep them up to date as to what's happening and what we're seeing on the ground. I think advocacy, once again, from the small business owners, directly from them when possible, but when not possible, that's when I step in and I say, hey, I have this testimony from them, they're experiencing this, they have dust in their window, they have dust in their parking lot, people don't know where their business is, help us, please, we're struggling. That's when I step in.
Yeah.
Does that answer a little bit of your question?
Well, it really helps me understand the complexities, because I can kind of hear in the back of my mind, okay, public funds for private businesses. So I understand that, kind of red flag, but it's really also a failure to look at the quality of life and how our neighborhoods benefit from the small businesses. And, you know, obviously you're gonna have some big box stores and national chains in various places. I'm not saying to get
Right.
rid of them, but they certainly have a lot more resources to come into a
Exactly.
community.
Exactly.
And I just think if neighborhoods thought about it and the state thought about it and people thought about it, they'd want to be somehow supportive of small businesses,
Definitely.
you would think.
Yeah, yeah, especially a specific tax credit like that, that's
Mhm.
specific to Purple Line businesses.
Yeah.
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 We have one more. Our last question is from Joanne Greek online. It's a bit of two parts. So, with Denver's construction mitigation program, there are some stakeholders that are very critical and expect us to soft pedal the impacts. We know from actual applications that show an average 30% revenue decline. And there are national studies citing 30 to 50% decline resulting from construction projects. How do you balance the realities business can expect without panicking them? And then to continue, additionally, in Denver, we had one FTA funded project where the environmental review or the National Environmental Policy Act, I believe, cited the need for a business support program. For another FTA funded project, there was no such recommendation in the environmental review. Seems that there should be more consistency. Did the Purple Line EA have a requirement for business support? This can make all the difference in advocating for grant support.
Okay, I'm gonna take this one at a time. The first one, can you reiterate the first one, the statistic in the first one?
There's an average 30% revenue decline ranging from 20 to 50%.
Okay.
And there are national studies citing 30% to 50% decline resulting from construction projects.
Okay, wow. So that one's the not to not strain and not stress the.
Yeah, how do you balance
Yeah.
the realities
Yeah.
business can
Okay,
expect?
okay, sorry, I was a lot, I'm like
Yeah.
a visual person, I'm like trying to think of the words in my head, okay. But to start that answer is. There is a sense of urgency, and I think that goes without saying, there is a sense of urgency, because every time you go anywhere. Especially as of recently, I know I've heard a lot of folks talk about traffic, I don't drive. But I've heard a lot of folks talk about Purple Line related traffic. Anytime you leave the house, you're seeing it in the middle of the street. This light rail is going to be above ground as well. It goes underground in 2 spots, but it will be above ground. So it's, you can't ignore it. There is a sense of urgency. That stress is not something that I personally deal with. I know that our small business coaches do though. And they've said to me like, hey Ness, like I talked to so-and-so today and this is what they're experiencing. And I'm scared for them because of XYZ issues, or can we help them get, you know, this type of support right now? Can we provide them with legal access for if their leases are coming up around the same time that, you know, construction is starting, or some weird, super specific example of that. So it's really difficult, but you have to just be there. I know a lot of what our small business coaches is like the technical stuff, what I talked about, technical assistance, but a lot of it is just like they're therapists, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're nurses, they're everything. So making sure that they have what they need before going out in the field, making sure that they're able to talk about what's happening, keeping them updated is something that I try to do as much as possible. So saying, hey, like, you know, this road and this road will be shut off next week. That's where you have 3 businesses, or that's where I know you have 4 businesses that you're helping out right now. Make sure they know about this in the coming weeks so they can get to work earlier, so they can help get customers in and out as fast as possible, and to support them, you know, if there's really, really bad traffic or parking situations. So keeping them updated in the circle of what's going on the Purple Line is definitely something that to help with stress, honestly, just keeping them informed. So that way it's not a surprise when they walk up to work and it took them an extra 30 or 45 minutes because of what is a dump truck or something like that. Can you reiterate the second question?
Yes. Additionally, in Denver, we had one FTA funded project where the environmental review cited the need for a business support program. For another FTA funded project, there was no such recommendation in the environmental review. Seems there should be more consistency. Did the Purple Line EA have a requirement for business support? This can make all the difference in advocating for grant support.
I have it with me actually right now. I carry it everywhere I go. That we have a version of that called the Business Impact Minimization Plan. And I actually helped launch a campaign alongside Javier when he was at LEDC. basically focused on making sure that that business impact minimization plan was updated with 2020 in mind. So it's updated with COVID in mind, a very changed economic landscape, and then also considering the stalls in construction that happened during that period of time as well. So this is interesting, and I'm going to give this example as a response to this question. We asked the MTA, so the state, we asked the MTA, the state, to address these issues and to update that plan with that in mind, and then also to hold them accountable to that plan. A lot of what that plan has in mind is a support. It's a clear support system. It's not necessarily a plan because it doesn't have any actionable items in it. There's no way for them to say, they just say, hey, we're going to support small business. Imagine that timeline. Imagine a small business owner reading that and thinking, hey, like, there's no way, what is this going to do? What are you going to do to support me? Instead of saying, hey, we're going to, make sure that there's outreach actively in your neighborhood. We're going to make sure that, communication is direct and it's specific and it's culturally relevant to your business. Instead of making sure that we have those things, it was very top line. It was very, very top line. So we asked for an update. They did provide us with an update, which is very fascinating finding. And it's recent that we did receive it. It took them 3 months, I think, to get back to us, if I remember correctly. But being advocates in that and asking and demanding, we launched a campaign. It was a sign-on letter. That's how we were able to get attention. And they finally paid attention to us and said, hey, like, we want to sit down, we want to talk with you. And the first of that conversation was not productive. It was very cut and dry, and we felt very disrespected, and we demanded a second. And when they heard us the second time, they actually came to us with actionable items, and they said, this is something we can meet you halfway on. This is something we can deliver, even in the middle of a campaign change at that. So there was definitely a lot of resources allotted to that, but it took coalition. It took a lot of members of the community being adamant too, and being heard, because half the time is the struggle to be heard.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today for our Q&A, but let's just one more round of applause for our speaker. Thank you so much. So for our online audience, that is the end of today's presentation. Thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you at the next one, which will be announced in the spring semester. So stay tuned and subscribe to our newsletter. For those of us in person, first of all, I want to shout out Cocineros. Yes, who is our caterer. So we're going to take about a 5-10 minute break, and then we're going to reconvene for the second part of our workshop, our discussion. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and for the online audience, thanks for joining. Lots of thank yous from the chat.
My people. Thanks for the question.
I see you had a number.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like
Did you see the Never
there's a few things I feel like we need to like
No.
review.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, the incredible.
Yes.
We both are.